Welcome to Debt Matters. Today we're tackling something really practical. It's about managing cash flow, specifically, when an account goes overdue. That moment when a business has to decide, okay, do we keep chasing this internally or is it time to stop? It's a calculation every company faces, right? Chasing old debt internally, it costs time, energy, payroll. Resources better spent elsewhere on growth. So what we want to give you today is that decision framework, the checklist, really. The methodical steps companies use to take the emotion out of it and decide, okay, this account needs to go to a third-party agency. It's all about efficiency, focused recovery. Let's start with the limits, though. Why can't a business just keep chasing its own debt forever? What stops them? Where's the ceiling on doing it all in-house?
Yeah, it really boils down to a couple of big resource strains. The first one, and it's huge, is opportunity cost. Think about your internal folks' accounts receivable, maybe even a sales manager involved in relationships. Their main job, what they're best at, is current business, processing new orders, keeping things running smoothly, and crucially, nurturing those relationships with customers who are paying. Every hour they spend chasing an old, difficult debt, maybe even dealing with someone hostile. Well, that's incredibly expensive time. It's not just their wages for that hour. It's the sale they didn't make, the paying client they didn't follow up with, that lost opportunity cost. It's often way bigger than people realize.
Right. You're swapping high-value, forward-looking work for, well, low-value conflict resolution, essential.
Exactly. And the second strain is the lack of specific tools and, frankly, leverage. Your internal team, they're primarily relationship managers. Once an account gets really resistant, they often just don't have the, let's say, the legal know-how or the deep investigative tools, or even just the psychological leverage that comes from being a neutral third party that's needed to motivate someone who's dug their heels in.
You mentioned investigation. I've seen skip tracing mentioned. What exactly is that in this context?
Skip tracing. Good point. For anyone listening who hasn't encountered it, it's basically specialist detective work for finding debtors. So if someone changes their phone number, moves house, drops an email address without telling you, they've skipped. Internal teams, they usually don't have access to the kinds of databases, public and private, that agencies use routinely to track people down, verify addresses, find current contacts. That ability to find someone who doesn't want to be found is a core advantage of using an agency.
Okay, yeah, that makes the limits of in-house efforts pretty clear.
Yeah.
So let's get into that decision framework itself, the checklist. Where do you start? What's the first trigger? This is where we get structured, right?
Right. Structure is key. The whole idea is to make it objective. We generally look at a 4-part checklist. And the first, probably the most fundamental criterion, is simply time and age of debt. It's a hard reality, but the older a debt gets, the less likely you are to ever see that money. The probability just plummets. Our data shows it drops off really fast. Wait 6 months, 180 days. Your chances might be down below 15%. It's grim. So the checklist absolutely needs a preset fixed cutoff point, a deadline.
The hard deadline, you mean?
Yeah.
Like, say, 90 days past due, and that's it. Internal efforts stop, even if it's, a long-standing client. Doesn't that risk damaging the relationship if you just pull the plug based on a date?
That's the potential conflict, yes. But the framework prioritizes consistency, which protects overall profitability. That 90 to 120-day window is common because, generally, after that point, the debtor has shown their intentions. Either they're actively choosing to pay other people first, or they've mentally filed your invoice under deal with later, maybe. Keeping it internal after that point, you're basically working against the odds, often based on, well, maybe misplaced loyalty or hope. That fixed date says, okay, this is officially cold for us internally. Time to escalate.
Got it. A firm deadline forces action, stops things from just drifting. Okay, what's next on the list? What if they were talking to you but just not tipping? No commitment.
That leads straight to criterion number 2, debtor response and engagement level. This looks beyond just the calendar date and focuses on their actual behavior. So if a debtor is consistently ignoring your attempts to connect formal demands, calls, emails, letters, the effort needed to get through usually goes way beyond what your internal team is set up for. The trick here is to quantify it. Turn that feeling of they're dodging me into a measurable trigger. So the checklist might say, for instance, if you've logged 5 formal attempts to contact them, documented attempts, mind you, over, say, 2 weeks, and you get nothing back. No real reply, no payment plan agreed. That's it. Escalate. Silence at that point is treated as refusal.
That makes sense. 5 documented tries. It makes it concrete, not just a gut feeling. Okay, now let's talk resource drain, the cost. What's the third trigger?
The third one is resource intensity and cost. This is about calculating the tipping point. You need to figure out when the internal effort, staff hours, system use, management oversight, even materials starts costing more than you could reasonably expect to get back from that specific debt.
You mentioned comparing internal cost to an agency's commission. How does a business actually do that comparison, make that call?
Okay, think about it like this. Take your accounts receivable person. Factor in their salary, benefits, office space, everything their fully loaded cost. Now, let's say they spend, I don't know, 10 hours in 1 month chasing one difficult $5,000 debt, just on that one account. You also have to factor in what they didn't do in those 10 hours, processing new payments, reconciling accounts, maybe helping sales, the opportunity cost. That alone might be, say, $500 of lost value or direct cost. Now, if an agency charges maybe 25% commission, that's $1,250 on your $5,000 debt if they collect it all. But they specialize in this. They have the tools. They'll likely recover it faster without pulling your staff off their core jobs. Suddenly, paying that commission looks like the smarter financial move. So the checklist often includes a kind of mandatory check. Calculate the internal burn rate versus the likely agency cost. It often makes the outsourcing decision obvious.
Yeah, framing it like that, tying up your own salaried staff versus paying a commission for results, really clarifies things. What about debts that get complicated, start simple, then suddenly need special handling?
That's criteria number 4, the last one, complexity and legal requirements. Because not all debts are straightforward invoice chasing. You run into situations like cross-border collections, where you're dealing with different laws. Or maybe you get wind of a potential bankruptcy filing. These need specialist knowledge, often legal knowledge. Or maybe the next step requires sending a formal letter before action, something with specific legal wording needed before you could even think about court. If things move beyond standard reminders and into territory needing that kind of formal legal intent or specific procedural steps, the checklist should flag that for immediate escalation. Agencies usually have access to legal expertise or are set up to handle these complexities in ways your internal AR team just isn't. It's about compliance and using the right leverage early on.
Okay, so putting it all together, using this kind of 4-part checklist, time, response, cost, and complexity. It's not just about getting the money back tactically. It sounds like it becomes a core strategic decision. Good for morale, good for the business overall.
Absolutely spot on. Strategically, having this formal process creates consistency. It ensures fairness. The rules are objective. 90 days pass or 5 failed contacts happen. Boom, it escalates. No one customer gets treated differently just because someone on your team feels awkward or hopes they'll pay eventually. It removes that subjectivity. And, critically, it protects your own team. Chasing people who won't pay, especially if they get difficult or abusive, is draining. It's demoralizing. Handing off those really cold, tough cases lets your internal staff focus their energy where it should be, on the positive side of the business, with the customers who value the relationship and pay their bills.
Yeah, for anyone managing a business, listen to this. That's really potent. Having that formal, non-negotiable process stops debts falling into that collection limbo you sometimes see. The checklist really drives efficiency. So, just to recap for everyone, we've covered those 4 key triggers. The time the debt's been outstanding, the debtor's response or lack thereof, the internal cost of chasing it, and the complexity or legal needs involved. These tell you when it's time to shift gears to externalize.
Right. And look, bringing in a third party does mean paying a commission. There's a cost. But what you gain is that necessary detachment, the specialized tools, sometimes the legally required processes that your own team just can't replicate effectively without compromising their main job. Which does raise a question for you to think about. How do you balance that necessary assertiveness in collection, the firm deadlines, the potential legal steps, with protecting your company's reputation, even when you're dealing with customers who, for whatever reason, haven't paid?
That balance is key, isn't it? It's worth remembering, the really effective businesses we see, they treat their debt recovery process with just as much structure, professionalism, and, frankly, lack of emotion as they do their sales process. Maybe the ultimate success isn't just getting the money back, but how professionally you handle it, even potentially seeing some of those debtors return as paying customers down the line. Something to consider as you build out your own escalation plan.